What if you could hold time itself in your hands, not as a concept, but as something real, something carved into clay or etched onto stone by people who lived thousands of years ago? Imagine discovering a fragment of an ancient calendar, its markings worn but still telling a story, not just of days and seasons, but of an entire civilization's dreams, fears, and understanding of the universe. These forgotten calendars are far more than artifacts. They're portals. They pull back the curtain on societies that have vanished from memory, revealing how they saw their place in the cosmos, how they honored their gods, and how they made sense of a world without the tools and technologies we take for granted. Each one of these unearthed timelines carries the weight of human curiosity, the timeless desire to measure, to predict, to find rhythm in chaos. Long before wristwatches and digital reminders, ancient cultures from the Mayans to the Egyptians were tracking celestial movements with astonishing precision, aligning their lives with the stars, the floods, the growing and harvesting seasons. Their calendars weren't just practical tools, they were expressions of identity, belief, and sometimes even survival. They connected everyday life to the divine, the agricultural to the spiritual, the individual to the collective. And in doing so, they left behind a legacy etched not only in stone and bone, but in the very way they experienced reality. In this video, we're going to journey across centuries and continents to explore what these lost calendars can teach us about the people who created them. We'll uncover how the Babylonians used the moon not just to mark months, but to read the will of the gods. We'll see how the Inca recorded time through knots, and how the creators of the Antikythera Mechanism built a mechanical universe inside a bronze box. This isn't just a story about how people kept time, it's about how time kept people together, how it shaped empires, guided rituals, and sometimes even dictated destiny. So come with us as we decode these ancient timekeepers, reconnect with voices silenced long ago, and rediscover the profound, beautiful, and often surprising ways humanity has always sought to capture the uncapturable, the relentless, mysterious flow of time itself. But what exactly is time? We all feel its push and pull every single day. The rush of a deadline, the slow stretch of a lazy afternoon, the turning of seasons. It's a constant in the human experience. Yet, if we could travel across the ancient world, we'd find that this universal constant was understood in wildly different ways. There was no single way to mark its passage. Instead, every civilization, from isolated islands to sprawling empires, crafted its own unique way of measuring existence, weaving its calendars from the threads of its environment, its gods, and its most profound fears. For societies rooted in the land, time was a wheel forever turning. Their lives depended on the predictable cycle of rains and sun, planting and harvest. Their calendars were maps of this repetition, deeply tied to the rhythms of nature. The ancient Egyptians didn't just watch the Nile flood, they lived by it. Their entire year was divided into 3 seasons directly named after the river's cycle. Akhit, the inundation, when the water spilled over the banks and nourished the soil. Perit, the growing season, when the land was bursting with life. And Shemu, the harvest, when the river receded and the crops were gathered. Their calendar was a story of survival, a practical and sacred dance with the forces that sustained them. It was solar-based, an incredible feat of observation, showing they looked not just to the earth but to the sun and the stars, noting the heliacal rising of Sirius, which signaled the coming flood. Their sense of time was about harmony with a powerful, life-giving environment. Now, travel across the ocean to the Maya. They also saw time as a cycle, but for them it was grander, more cosmic, and deeply sacred. They weren't just tracking seasons, they were tracking the journeys of gods and the fate of worlds. Their long count calendar measured vast epochs, stretching over thousands of years, each era with its own destiny. They believed time itself was a divine force that moved in repeating patterns, and it was their duty, through precise calculation and ritual, to keep these cycles in motion. Their calendar was a complex interlocking system of sacred cycles and solar years, used by priests to determine the most auspicious times for everything from coronating a king to planting a field. For the Maya, a date wasn't just a point on a line. It had a personality, a spiritual weight that influenced daily life and the cosmos itself. Contrast this with the worldview that began to emerge in parts of the ancient Mediterranean and later took hold in the West, the idea of linear time. This is the arrow of time we're most familiar with today, a line stretching from a definite beginning through the present and toward some future end. This concept is deeply embedded in empires and monotheistic religions, stories of creation, prophecy, and a final judgment. It's a narrative of progress, of history moving toward a climax. The Roman Empire, for instance, used its calendar to organize conquest, administer law, and celebrate the anniversaries of its emperors, marking a forward march of power and legacy. This linear view encourages a focus on progress, change, and the unique, unrepeatable nature of historical events. So, what do these fundamentally different perspectives tell us? They reveal that a calendar is never just a neutral tool for scheduling. It is a cultural fingerprint. It shows us what a people valued most. Was it the reliable turn of the seasons that fed them? Was it the precise movements of the planets that revealed the gods' will? Was it the linear progression of a nation's history and power? The way a culture measures time shapes how its people think about their lives, whether they see themselves as part of an eternal, repeating natural order, or as actors in a unique, unfolding story. It influences their rituals, their governance, their science, and their very identity. Our own modern Gregorian calendar, which now blankets the globe, carries with it the legacy of papal authority, scientific revision, and colonial spread. It's a system designed for administrative synchrony, but in its global dominance, we may have lost touch with the localized, ecological, and spiritual rhythms that once defined time for so many. By uncovering these forgotten timelines, we don't just learn how ancient people counted days, we learn how they understood their very existence. Now, let's turn our attention to a specific object, a single artifact that perfectly embodies this blend of the practical and the sacred, the scientific and the mythological. It's a discovery so extraordinary that it fundamentally rewrote our understanding of ancient technological capability. In the early 1900s, sponge divers exploring a Roman-era shipwreck near the small Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon a heavily encrusted, corroded lump of bronze and wood. For decades, it sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, largely ignored, assumed to be a piece of a statue or a common nautical instrument. It wasn't until the 1970s that advanced imaging technology like gamma-ray and X-ray analysis revealed the shocking truth hidden beneath the layers of rock and sea salt. This wasn't a simple ornament. It was a complex, precision-engineered mechanical device, a clockwork universe in a box, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism. Dating to around 100 years before the Common Era, this device is often called the world's first known analog computer. Imagine a portable, hand-cranked machine, housed in a wooden case not much larger than a shoebox. On its front and back were numerous dials and pointers, and inside was a breathtaking assembly of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut by hand. By turning a handle on the side, the user could set the entire mechanism in motion, causing the gears to rotate and the pointers to advance across the dials, each moving at a different, calculated rate. But what was it computing? It wasn't crunching numbers for accounting or engineering. It was modeling the heavens themselves. The primary dials tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks across the zodiac. It could predict lunar phases and, most impressively, solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, events that were of immense importance and often feared. This is where the mechanism reveals its true genius and its deep cultural purpose. It wasn't just a scientific tool for astronomers. It was a practical, ritual, and social guide for Hellenistic society. One of its dials was dedicated to tracking the 4-year cycle of the Panhellenic Games, the ancient equivalent of the Olympics, an event that was both a major athletic competition and a religious festival honoring Zeus. Another part of the device calculated the timing of various religious ceremonies and agricultural festivals tied to specific celestial events. This tells us that for its creators and users, there was no hard separation between calculating an eclipse and knowing when to hold the games in honor of a god. Science and spirituality were two sides of the same coin. The precise, predictable mechanics of the cosmos were the physical expression of the divine order, and by understanding that order through a machine, they believed they could harmonize human life with the will of the gods and the rhythm of the universe. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to abandon any notion of a simple, linear progression of technology from primitive to advanced. Here, over 2,000 years ago, was a level of mechanical sophistication that would not be seen again in Europe until the development of complex astronomical clocks in the 14th century. It is a powerful, tangible reminder that our ancestors were not just philosophical thinkers or rudimentary farmers. They were brilliant engineers, innovative scientists, and deeply spiritual people who sought to create tools to navigate both the physical and the metaphysical worlds. It is a single, stunning data point proving that the timelines we have erased were often far more complex, more connected, and more intellectually vibrant than we ever dared to imagine. While the Greeks were engineering bronze gears to mirror the heavens on the other side of the world, a civilization was carving time itself into stone, conceiving of cycles so vast they challenge our modern imagination. The Maya of Mesoamerica developed a system of timekeeping that was less about tracking the days for harvest and more about mapping the very destiny of the cosmos. At the heart of this system was the Long Count calendar, a masterpiece of astronomical observation and profound spiritual belief that reached far beyond the infamous and misunderstood 2012 end date scare. To truly grasp the Long Count, we must first understand that the Maya didn't have just one calendar. They operated several simultaneously, like interlocking gears in a conceptual machine far more complex than any made of metal. There was the 260-day Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar used for divination and ritual. There was the 365-day Hob, the rough solar year for agriculture. But the Long Count was the grand cosmological clock. It was their way of measuring immense, linear stretches of time from a fixed starting point, a date they calculated as the creation of the world as they knew it, which corresponds to August 11, 3114 before the Common Era on our calendar. This system counted the days in nested units: kin days, Yunal 20 days, Tun 360 days, Katun 7,200 days, or about 20 years, and finally, the Baktun, a period of 144,000 days, or roughly 394 of our years. The complete cycle, a grand cycle, was 13 Baktuns, totaling over 5,125 years. That full cycle was what concluded in 2012, not an end of the world, but the completion of one great age and the anticipated beginning of the next. This wasn't abstract math. This deep time was woven into the fabric of Mayan existence. Their incredibly accurate astronomical calculations predicting Venus cycles, eclipses, and solstices were not just for show, they were a form of communion with the gods. Kings and priests used the long count to legitimize their rule, timing their coronations to occur on auspicious Khatan endings, linking their own power to the turning of the cosmic gears. Major monuments like the towering stelae erected in city plazas were often dedicated on these significant dates, serving as permanent stone anchors connecting a king's reign to the eternal rhythm of time. A prophecy wasn't just a prediction, it was a reading of the cosmic mood. Each period of time carried its own spiritual weight, its own destiny. The end of a Khatan wasn't just a turnover of numbers, it was a moment of potential upheaval, renewal, or obligation, requiring specific ceremonies to ensure the smooth transition of cosmic power. This reveals a philosophical view of existence that is fundamentally different from our own linear, progressive narrative. For the Maya, time was not a straight line marching toward a single conclusion. It was a series of great, repeating cycles. Each grand cycle of 13 Bactons was a world age, and its end was not an annihilation but a transformation, a resetting of the cosmic stage for the next performance. Destruction was always followed by creation. This cyclical view infused their culture with a sense of recurring responsibility. History wasn't a series of unique, unrepeatable events, but a spiral of patterns and lessons returning in different forms. Their meticulous recording of dates on temples and stelae was a way of honoring these patterns, of learning from the past to navigate the future turns of the great cycle. The modern hype around 2012, then, was a profound misreading of Mayan wisdom. They were not forecasting doom, they were anticipating a rebirth. Their long count calendar is perhaps one of humanity's most ambitious attempts to find a meaningful pattern in the vastness of time, to situate human civilization within a cosmological drama of epic scale. It challenges us to expand our own temporal horizons, to consider that our modern, frantic, quarter-to-quarter view of time might be blinding us to the larger, slower, more majestic cycles of nature and history. In their carved stone numbers, we find an invitation to think in epochs, not just in deadlines. While the Greeks engineered intricate mechanisms and the Maya tracked vast cosmic cycles, another civilization's understanding of time was born not from gears or prophecy, but from the life-giving pulse of a river. In ancient Egypt, time was the Nile. Their entire existence, their economy, their religion, and their very identity were tied to its predictable annual flood. And so, their calendar became a direct reflection of this relationship, a solar-based, brilliantly practical system that synchronized human life with the rhythms of the natural world in a way few others have achieved. This Egyptian civil calendar was remarkably simple and effective. It divided the year into 3 seasons, each one defined by the Nile's behavior and the agricultural activities it dictated. The first season was Akit, the inundation. This was when the river would overflow its banks, covering the surrounding desert with a layer of rich, black silt. For the Egyptians, this wasn't a time of hardship or flood damage. It was a period of renewal, a divine gift. The land was submerged, and with farming impossible, labor was redirected to massive state projects, building the pyramids, temples, and monuments that would define their civilization for millennia. The second season, Perit, was the emergence. As the waters receded, they left behind that incredibly fertile soil, and the planting began. This was the growing season, a time of intense agricultural activity where the entire society worked to fill the granaries that would sustain them. Finally, there was Shemu, the harvest. The land was dry, the crops were gathered, and the heat was at its most intense. Each season was further divided into 4 months of 30 days each, resulting in 360 days. To complete the solar year, they added 5 extra days at the end of the year, called the epagomenal days. These were considered outside the normal year, a time of danger and transition, often associated with the birthdays of major gods like Osiris and Horus. What makes this system so revolutionary is its solar foundation. While many of their neighbors used lunar calendars, which quickly fall out of sync with the solar year, the Egyptians recognized the need to anchor their calendar to the sun to keep it aligned with the agricultural seasons their survival depended on. This required sophisticated astronomical observation. They didn't just watch the river, they watched the sky. The key event was the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, known to them as Sopdet. After a period of invisibility, Sirius would reappear just before dawn in the eastern sky. This celestial event always coincided with the start of the Nile's annual flood. The Egyptians noticed this correlation and used it as their anchor point, their New Year's Day. The first day of the inundation season was marked not just by the rising water, but by the rising star. This connection between a celestial event and a terrestrial one is a stunning achievement in early astronomy, showing a deep understanding of the cosmos's clockwork. This calendar was far more than a farmer's almanac. It was a powerful tool of religious and state authority. The pharaoh was not just a king, he was the living embodiment of the god Horus, the essential link between the people and the gods. It was his divine duty to maintain the cosmic order, balance, and truth. The predictable, orderly flooding of the Nile was the ultimate expression of in action. By controlling the calendar that tracked this divine order, the pharaoh reinforced his own indispensability. Major religious festivals were meticulously timed to this calendar. The beautiful Opet festival, for instance, involved a grand procession where the statues of the gods Amun, Mut, and Khonsu were carried from Karnak Temple to Luxor Temple. This event was scheduled for the second month of the inundation, when the Nile's high waters made river travel easiest for the sacred barges. Even the journey of the sun god Ra across the sky was mirrored in the calendar's solar basis, further entwining the divine with the daily and seasonal cycles. In the Egyptian system, we see perhaps the purest example of a calendar born from absolute necessity and refined by spiritual belief. Time was not an abstract concept to be measured for its own sake. It was the heartbeat of their world, a rhythm written in water, silt, and sunlight. Their calendar was a map for survival, a schedule for worship, and a declaration of their place within a harmonious universe. It shows us a civilization that looked at the world around them, understood its patterns intimately, and built a system of time that didn't fight against nature but flowed with it, a lesson in observation and adaptation that resonates deeply even today. Leaving the banks of the Nile, we travel to the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the Babylonians crafted a relationship with time that was less about harmony with nature and more about deciphering the will of the gods. For them, the calendar was a divine codex, and the sky was a text to be read with anxious, watchful eyes. Their system, one of the most influential in the ancient world, was fundamentally lunar, but its purpose extended far beyond merely marking the days. It was the primary tool for a powerful priestly class whose job was to interpret the universe's warnings and blessings for the king and the state. The structure was elegant in its precision. Each month began not with a calculation, but with an observation, the first sighting of the thin crescent moon low in the twilight sky. This meant that months could be 29 or 30 days long, creating a lunar year of about 354 days. The Babylonians were acutely aware that this fell short of the solar year, and if left uncorrected, their agricultural festivals would slowly drift through the seasons. To solve this, they developed a sophisticated system of intercalation, the periodic insertion of an extra month. By the reign of King Nabonassar in the 8th century before the Common Era, this process had become remarkably systematic. Astronomer priests, through meticulous observation, would decree when to add a second month of Alulu or Adaru, ensuring that their lunar calendar remained in lockstep with the solar cycle and the crucial seasons for planting and harvest. On its surface, this was a feat of practical astronomy, but its true driving force was not agriculture alone. It was the need to perform rituals at the correct, divinely appointed time. This is where the Babylonian concept of time becomes truly fascinating. They believed that the gods communicated their intentions for humanity through celestial phenomena. A lunar eclipse wasn't just an astronomical event. It was a direct message, often a terrifying omen foretelling the death of a king or the fall of a city. The movements of planets against the backdrop of stars were passed for meaning. The planet Mars, known as Nergal, was associated with war and pestilence. Its position and brightness could dictate military strategy. To navigate this complex system of celestial divination, they relied on extensive compendia of knowledge, the most famous being the series of cuneiform tablets known as Enuma Anu Enlil, meaning when the gods Anu and Enlil. This was essentially a massive reference manual for priest astrologers. It contained thousands of omens meticulously catalogued. For example, it might state, if the moon is eclipsed on the first day of the month, the king will die and his son will not take the throne, followed by prescribed rituals to avert this fate. The role of the court astrologer or Baru priest was therefore one of immense political power. He would submit regular reports to the king, interpreting the celestial signs and advising on action. A letter from one such priest to the Assyrian king Esarhaddon might caution against launching a military campaign in a certain month based on Venus's position, or recommend a specific ritual offering to appease an angry god signaled by a solar halo. This made timekeeping the very backbone of statecraft. The calendar did not just schedule events, it determined their outcome. A day was not neutral, it was inherently lucky or unlucky, filled with positive or negative potential based on the celestial script. This created a society living in a constant, dynamic conversation with the cosmos, where every month began with uncertainty, and every eclipse was a moment of collective dread and ritualized pleading. In this system, we see the ultimate fusion of the practical and the spiritual. The Babylonians needed an accurate calendar to run their complex agricultural and urban society, but they refined that accuracy to an incredible degree because they believed their survival depended on reading the gods' messages correctly. Their legacy is profound. Their 19-year cycle of intercalation, their division of the circle into 360 degrees, and their extensive astrological traditions were passed down to the Greeks and from them to the rest of the world. The Babylonian calendar shows us that for one of history's great civilizations, time was not a passive backdrop but an active, communicative force, a sacred language in which the gods wrote their intentions, and the duty of humanity was to watch, calculate, and pray. While other empires etched their histories into stone tablets or painted them on papyrus scrolls, the Inca of the Andes Mountains built one of the largest and most organized empires in the Americas, using a system of record-keeping that, to this day, remains one of history's most tantalizing puzzles, the Quipu. Imagine an intricate tapestry of hanging cords, some as short as your arm, others long enough to touch the floor, each one a different color, each tied with a series of complex knots. To the untrained eye, it might look like an abstract piece of fiber art or a collection of old ropes, but to a trained Inca administrator, known as a Quipu, This was a living, dynamic record, a database that could track everything from tributes and census data to the movements of the stars and the sacred timing of rituals. This was how the Inca, without a system of writing as we know it, managed to synchronize an empire spanning thousands of miles and millions of people. The sheer physicality of the Quipu is its first remarkable feature. The primary cord, often thick and horizontal, served as the anchor. From it dangled numerous pendant cords. These could have subsidiary cords attached to them, creating a complex hierarchical tree of information. The key to decoding this information lay in several elements: the position of the knot on the cord, the type of knot used, the color of the cord itself, and even the spin and ply of the fiber, whether it was cotton or camelid wool from llamas or alpacas. A decimal system was at the heart of the numerical data. A figure of 8 not represented the number 1. A long knot with a specific number of turns could represent numbers 2 through 9. And a single overhand knot, a cluster of tightly wound loops, stood for 0, a concept the Inca grasped long before it became common in other parts of the world. These knots were placed in different positions along the cord to denote units, tens, hundreds, and thousands. With just a few cords, an administrator could record vast quantities of information, from the number of bushels of maize in a storehouse to the count of men eligible for military service in a distant province. But the Quipu was far more than an ancient spreadsheet. Its true mystery lies in what scholars believe was its narrative, non-numerical function. This is where the concept of time truly comes into play. The different colors were likely a form of code. A red cord might signify a warrior or a conflict, a yellow cord could represent gold, and a green one might mean maize or a time of harvest. By combining these colors with specific knot placements, a Quipu could tell a story. It could record a historical event like the succession of a new Sapa Inca, the emperor. More importantly for our journey, it could encode calendrical information. A specific arrangement of knots and colors on a dedicated Quipu might have been used to track the passage of days between important religious ceremonies tied to the solstices and equinoxes. Another might have recorded the optimal planting and harvesting seasons for different altitudes across the empire's incredibly varied terrain, from coastal deserts to high mountain peaks. These were not abstract dates, they were vital, living schedules that dictated when communities should plant potatoes, when they should offer sacrifices to Intai, the sun god, and when they should gather for great festivals that reinforced social bonds and imperial control. This system reveals a civilization with a profoundly different, yet no less sophisticated, relationship with history and time. For the Inca, the past was not a series of events to be read in a book. It was a tangible, physical object that could be held, transported, and consulted. The Quipucamayok who guarded these devices were among the most powerful and educated people in the empire, the human hard drives that gave the Quipus their meaning. They could read the cords, translating the knots and colors into detailed oral reports for the emperor. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they were baffled by these devices. Many were destroyed by priests who saw them as idolatrous or simply primitive, but a few survive in museums, silent witnesses to a lost world. Modern scholars, using advanced technology and painstaking analysis, are only beginning to crack their non-numerical codes. The Inca Quipu forces us to expand our definition of a calendar beyond papyrus, stone, or bronze. It challenges the very Western idea that a writing system must be based on phonetic symbols to be considered complex or valid. Here was a civilization that used texture, color, and spatial reasoning to create a three-dimensional, tactile timeline. Their calendar was not a flat page to be turned, but an object to be handled, a physical manifestation of time itself, woven into the very fabric of their society. It stands as a powerful testament to human ingenuity, proving that the drive to record, to measure, and to remember our place in time can find expression in the most beautiful and unexpected forms. Across the world, from the intricate knots of the Inca, ancient Chinese scholars were developing a system of time that was less about recording quantities and more about understanding qualities, the very moral character of a moment. This was the sexagenary cycle, a complex and elegant framework that wove together astronomy, philosophy, and statecraft into a 60-year rhythm that still echoes in East Asian cultures today. At its heart was a profound belief that time was not a neutral void but a dynamic field of energy, a force imbued with specific characteristics that could harmonize with or work against human endeavors. To live wisely was to move in time with this cosmic pulse. The mechanics of the system are a masterpiece of combinatorial logic. It pairs two distinct sets of symbols. The first are the 10 heavenly stems, which some scholars believe originally related to the 10-day week used in very ancient times. The second are the 12 earthly branches, which correspond to the 12 months of the lunar year and famously to the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac, the rat, ox, tiger, and so on. By pairing the first stem with the first branch, the second with the second, and so on, you create a sequence of 60 unique combinations before the cycle resets. This 60-year cycle was the grand clock of history, used to date events in official chronicles and to mark the reign of emperors, but its application went far deeper than mere chronology. This same system was used to mark the 60-day cycle within a year, the 60-hour cycle within a 5-day period, and even the direction of spiritual energy in practices like Feng Shui. This wasn't just math, it was a language for interpreting the universe's flow. Each of the stems and branches was associated with one of the 5 fundamental elements of Chinese cosmology: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, but also with a polarity of yin or yang. This meant that every single year, day, and hour in the cycle carried a specific elemental and energetic signature. A year of Yang fire horse, for instance, was understood to have a very different character than a year of Yin water rabbit. This created a powerful tool for divination and decision-making. An imperial astrologer would use this system to determine the most auspicious date to launch a military campaign, sign a treaty, or plant the season's first rice. A family would consult it to choose a wedding day that promised harmony and fertility, or to name a newborn child in a way that would balance the elemental forces present at their birth. The calendar was a guide for aligning human action with the inherent virtue of the moment. We can see this philosophy etched into history itself on some of China's oldest artifacts. Oracle bones from the Shang dynasty, dating back over 3,000 years, bear inscriptions where court diviners used early forms of this cycle to pose questions to the ancestors about the luckiness of a forthcoming 10-day period. Bronze vessels from the Zhou dynasty are often inscribed with dates recorded in this stem branch system, permanently fixing a ritual or a gift in the flow of cosmic time. This system became the bedrock of Chinese historiography. Events weren't just listed, they were qualitatively defined by their place in the Great Cycle, suggesting that history itself moved through phases of dynamic change and stable consolidation, much like the alternating patterns of yin and yang. This view of time is deeply rooted in the complementary philosophies of Confucianism and Taoism. For the Confucian, living in harmony with the cosmic order was the foundation of a moral and stable society. The emperor, the son of heaven, had a sacred duty to ensure his rituals and policies were perfectly timed to maintain this harmony. The calendar was his most important tool for governing. For the Taoist, the cycle reflected the natural, spontaneous flow of the Tao, the way of the universe. the wise person didn't fight against the energy of the time but moved with it like a bamboo bending in the wind. In both views, time has a moral dimension. A well-chosen action taken at the right moment is an act of virtue, while forcing an action against the grain of time is a form of disharmony that could lead to disaster. The Chinese sexagenary cycle presents a world where the universe is constantly speaking through the medium of time, and our highest calling is to learn its language and listen. This intricate dance of celestial mechanics finds a different, yet equally profound, expression in the spiritual traditions of India. While the Chinese system focused on cyclical energies, the Hindu Panchangam presents time as a divine symphony, a complex and sacred rhythm that dictates the most auspicious moments for every action, from the grandest festival to the simplest daily chore. More than just a calendar, the Panchangam is a comprehensive guide to living in perfect harmony with the universe itself, a tool that seamlessly weaves together astronomy, astrology, and ancient scripture into the very fabric of daily life. The name itself reveals its complexity. Pancha means 5 and Anga means limbs. This almanac is built upon 5 fundamental components, each a critical piece of the cosmic puzzle. First is the Vara, the solar day of the week. Second is the Thai, the lunar day, which is the time it takes for the longitudinal angle between the moon and the sun to increase by 12 degrees. This creates 30 Thais in a lunar month, each with its own unique spiritual significance. Third is the Nakshatra, the lunar mansion. The zodiac is divided into 27 segments, each presided over by a specific star constellation, and the moon's passage through these nakshatras is meticulously tracked. Fourth is the Yoga, a period calculated by combining the movements of the sun and moon. And fifth is the Karana, half of a Thai. By cross-referencing these 5 ever-changing elements, a Hindu priest or astrologer can determine the precise quality of any given moment. Is it a favorable time to start a new business, a shub, a muhurta, or is it a period better suited for reflection and caution? The Panchangam provides the answer, offering a schedule for existence that is believed to maximize spiritual merit and worldly success. This system's roots stretch back thousands of years to the Vedas, the oldest scriptures of Hinduism, which contain detailed astronomical observations. But its philosophical scope is truly cosmic. It operates on a scale that is almost incomprehensible to the modern mind. Time is not just measured in days and years, but in vast cycles called yugas. We are currently believed to be in the Kali Yuga, an age of darkness and conflict that spans 432,000 years. This is just one cycle within a much greater repetition of creation and dissolution known as a kalpa, a single day in the life of the creator god Brahma, which lasts over 4 billion years. This grand vision places human life within an almost infinite temporal landscape, a perspective that is simultaneously humbling and empowering. Our brief lifetimes are but a single note in a symphony that has been playing for eons, yet the choices we make within that note, the actions we take at the right time, in the right way, are seen as crucial to maintaining the cosmic order, or dharma. In practice, this makes the Panchangam an indispensable part of life for millions. It dictates the dates of major festivals like Diwali and Holi, which are not fixed on a solar calendar but move according to these lunar and stellar calculations. It guides farmers on the optimal days for sowing and harvesting, tying agriculture directly to the phases of the moon and the position of the stars. For individuals, it is consulted for every major life event: the birth of a child, a wedding, a new home, even the start of a journey. The system embodies a worldview where there is no separation between the spiritual and the practical, the cosmic and the personal. To act in accordance with the Panchangam is to perform one's duty or dharma. in a way that supports the entire universe. It is a breathtakingly holistic view where checking a calendar is not about managing a schedule, but about participating in a sacred, eternal rhythm. But while spiritual systems sought harmony with the cosmos, another ancient power discovered that controlling time itself was one of the most effective ways to control an empire. In the final turbulent decades of the Roman Republic, the calendar had become a perfect reflection of the state's dysfunction, a chaotic, lunar-based mess that was hopelessly out of sync with the seasons. The responsibility for declaring the start of each new month and for inserting an extra intercalary month to keep the year aligned with the sun fell to a specific group of priests, the pontifices. This was a role ripe for corruption. These politically appointed officials could shorten the year for their allies, extending a popular general's term in office, or lengthen it for their enemies, delaying an election or a vote. Time had become a political weapon, manipulated for short-term gain with no regard for the farmers who relied on the seasons or the stability of the state itself. By the time Julius Caesar took power, the Roman calendar was running a staggering 67 days ahead of the solar year. Winter festivals were being celebrated in what felt like autumn, and the civic year had completely lost its connection to the natural world it was supposed to organize. Julius Caesar, fresh from his campaigns in Egypt, recognized this chaos as both a practical problem and a monumental opportunity. In Egypt, he had been impressed by the stability and accuracy of their solar calendar, and he brought back with him the Alexandrian astronomer Sosigenes to help design a solution. The result was the Julian reform of 45 before the Common Era, one of the most enduring acts of his dictatorship. The new calendar was a masterpiece of simplification and imposition. It discarded the unreliable moon and firmly anchored the Roman year to the sun. It established a year of 365 days, divided into 12 months, with a single day added every 4 years, the leap year, to account for the roughly 6 extra hours it takes the Earth to orbit the sun. This was a radical shift from a flexible, manipulable system to a fixed, predictable, and authoritarian one. The extra days needed to correct the old drift were simply inserted into the year 46 BCE, a year that lasted a total of 445 days and was wryly referred to by Romans as the last year of confusion. But it was confusion with a very specific purpose. The reform was far more than an administrative adjustment. It was a profound act of political theater and consolidation. By fixing the calendar, Caesar was symbolically asserting his control over the very flow of time, bringing order to chaos just as he claimed to be doing for the Republic itself. The month of Quintilis was renamed Julius, our July, in his honor, permanently etching his name into the rhythm of the year. The new, stable calendar allowed for the efficient administration of a vast and growing empire. Tax collection could be standardized, military campaigns could be planned with certainty, and festivals could be fixed to their proper seasons, lending divine sanction to the new order. Time was no longer a plaything for squabbling politicians. It was a tool of imperial unity, synchronizing the lives of everyone from a senator in Rome to a soldier on the German frontier to a merchant in Alexandria under a single Roman rhythm. This was timekeeping as a statement of power, a declaration that Rome's authority now extended beyond laws and legions to govern the fundamental structure of lived experience. The Julian calendar's legacy is a powerful reminder that the way we measure time is never politically neutral. Caesar's reform was not a disinterested scientific advancement. It was a calculated move to legitimize his rule, weaken his opponents, and create a unified temporal framework for imperial control. It shows us that calendars are not just about tracking days, but about who has the power to decide what those days mean. This act of standardizing time across a diverse realm would become a template for empires throughout history, a way to impose a central identity and suppress local traditions. The very fact that we still use a modified version of Caesar's calendar today, 2,000 years later, is a testament to the enduring power of that political decision, a permanent monument to the idea that he who controls the clock controls the world. Moving from the grand political ambitions of Rome, we find a calendar that speaks not of imperial power, but of deep, localized connection to the land and its spirits. In 1897, in a field near the town of Coligny in eastern France, a farmer's plow struck against something hard and metallic. What he unearthed was not a weapon or a piece of jewelry, but something far more extraordinary, a shattered, life-sized bronze statue of a god, and nestled among its fragments, the scattered pieces of a massive bronze tablet, covered in meticulously punched inscriptions and arranged in carefully aligned columns. When painstakingly reassembled, this artifact revealed itself to be the Coligny calendar, a 5-year liturgical and agricultural almanac used by the Celtic peoples of Gaul in the 2nd century of the Common Era. It is the most important key we have to understanding how the Celts, a people often defined by their warrior ethos and oral traditions, actually perceived and organized the very flow of time itself. This was no simple tally of days. The Coligny calendar is a breathtakingly complex lunar-solar hybrid, a sophisticated attempt to reconcile the 29.5-day lunar cycle with the 365-day solar year. It divides its 5-year period into 62 lunar months, each month beginning with the first visible crescent moon. But to prevent this lunar count from drifting completely out of sync with the seasons, the Celtic timekeepers employed a brilliant system of intercalation. They would periodically insert an entire extra month, a process they had down to a precise science, ensuring that their harvest festivals always landed near the actual harvest and their midwinter ceremonies stayed anchored to the darkest time of the year. This required advanced astronomical observation and mathematical skill, proving that the so-called barbarians of Gaul possessed a sophisticated intellectual tradition that rivaled their Mediterranean contemporaries. Yet the true magic of the Coligny calendar lies not in its mechanics, but in its markings. Each day on the tablet is not just a number, it is a qualitative statement. Certain days are explicitly labeled with the abbreviation MAT, short for Matu, meaning good or lucky. Others are marked Annum for Anmatu, meaning not good or unlucky. And a third category is simply Ivos, a term we believe signifies a day of particularly high religious significance, perhaps a major festival. This reveals a world view where time itself was not a neutral, empty container. A day had its own inherent spiritual character, its own potential for success or disaster. To plant your crops on an Anmatu day was to invite failure. To begin a journey or sign a treaty on a Matu day was to harness the favorable currents of fate. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a form of cosmic navigation, a way for the community to align its actions with the perceived rhythms of the divine world. This system paints a vivid picture of Celtic society. Their sense of time was not a straight line marching toward a single destiny, but a great, repeating wheel of sacred moments. The year was punctuated by 4 great fire festivals that are still echoed in modern traditions. Imbolc at the start of February, marking the quickening of the land and the lactation of ewes. Beltane on May 1st, a celebration of fertility and life with great bonfires. Lugnasad in August, the festival of the god Lugh and the first harvest, and most famously, Samhain at the end of October, which we now know as Halloween. This was the Celtic New Year, a time when the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead was believed to be at its thinnest. The Coligny calendar would have been the central tool for determining the exact timing of these events, which were not just parties but essential communal rituals. They were moments to reaffirm social bonds, to pay tribute to local chieftains, to conduct legal business, and most importantly, to perform the necessary ceremonies to ensure the land's fertility and the tribe's survival for another turn of the wheel. In this way, the calendar was far more than an administrative device. It was the heartbeat of the community, a sacred text in bronze that everyone, from the lowliest farmer to the highest druid, would have relied upon. Its very existence as a public inscription, rather than a secret scroll kept by priests, suggests it was a communal reference point. It bound the people together under a shared rhythm, a collective understanding of which days were for work, which for ceremony, and which for rest and caution. The Coligny calendar reminds us that for many ancient cultures, timekeeping was not a solitary act of checking a personal digital planner. It was a communal dance with the cosmos, a way of weaving the human community into the very fabric of the natural and supernatural world, ensuring that both continued to turn in harmonious, life-sustaining cycles. While the Celts saw time as a sacred wheel of repeating festivals, the ancient Persians developed a vision of time that was not a cycle, but a great, unfolding story with a definitive beginning, a climactic middle, and a final, transformative ending. This was the Zoroastrian calendar, a system deeply infused with a cosmic philosophy that saw all of existence as a monumental struggle between two fundamental forces. For the followers of the prophet Zarathustra, time was the stage upon which the drama of good and evil played out, and their calendar was the script that guided them through each act, aligning their daily lives with this ultimate spiritual battle. The structure of the year itself reflected this dualistic worldview. Unlike the 4 seasons common in many calendars, the Zoroastrian year was divided into 6 seasons, or Gahanbars, each one corresponding to a different phase of the creation story and a specific aspect of agricultural and spiritual life. These weren't arbitrary divisions, they were chapters in a sacred narrative. The first Gahanbar, for instance, Midayana, celebrated the creation of the sky, while others marked the creation of water, earth, plants, animals, and finally, humankind. Each season was capped by a festival that was both a thanksgiving for the earth's bounty and a communal reaffirmation of the ethical duty to tend to and protect that creation. This calendar wove the mythic origins of the world directly into the practical rhythm of planting, growing, and harvesting, making every farmer a participant in upholding the divine order. At the heart of this temporal system, and surviving vibrantly to this day, is the magnificent festival of Nowruz. Falling precisely on the spring equinox, Nowruz is far more than a New Year's celebration. It is the ultimate symbol of the Zoroastrian concept of time. It marks a moment of cosmic renewal and moral cleansing. In the weeks leading up to it, families engage in kone to kone, literally shaking the house, a thorough spring cleaning that is as much spiritual as it is physical, intended to sweep away the dust of the past year and the lingering forces of negativity. They set a Haft-Sin table adorned with 7 items starting with the Persian letter S, each symbolizing a hope for the new year: sprouts for rebirth, apples for beauty, garlic for health, and sumac for the sunrise of new beginnings. At the exact moment the sun crosses the celestial equator, families gather to celebrate, sharing meals and exchanging gifts. Nowruz is a powerful ritual of rebirth, echoing the Zoroastrian belief that the universe itself is constantly being renewed through the choices of human beings who side with light, truth, and righteousness. This brings us to the most profound aspect of this calendar, its linearity. For the Zoroastrians, time was not an endless loop. It had a starting point, the moment of creation by the wise Lord, Ahura Mazda. It is moving through a long period of mixture where his benevolent spirit, Spenta Manu, is in constant conflict with the destructive spirit, Angra Manu. And it is progressing through human choice and action toward a final, definitive end, the Frashokrati, or the final renovation. This will be a great cosmic event where evil will be utterly defeated. The world will be purified in a river of molten metal, and all of creation will be restored to a state of perfect, eternal truth and immortality. This is a radical departure from the cyclical time of the Maya or the Celts. Here, history has a purpose and a destination. Every day, every festival, every ethical decision is a step forward in this great collective journey toward a world made perfect. The calendar, therefore, was not just a way to mark time, but a map of salvation, a constant reminder that human morality has cosmic consequences and that each individual has a role to play in the ultimate triumph of light over darkness. Far from the grand cosmic cycles and imperial decrees, on the vast and ancient continent of Australia, a profoundly different understanding of time was flourishing, one that was not imposed upon the land but emerged directly from it. For over 60,000 years, the hundreds of distinct Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures have been developing intricate seasonal calendars that are not grids on a wall or numbers on a page, but deeply woven into the very fabric of the living world. These are not abstract systems of measurement. They are dynamic, multi-sensory narratives of place, encoded with an ecological wisdom so precise it could guide a civilization in perfect balance with its environment for millennia. Imagine a calendar where the turning of the year is not marked by a date, but by the first flowering of a specific gum tree, signaling that the fish in the river are now fat and ready to be caught. Or by the arrival of a particular migratory bird, whose song tells you that the yams in a certain part of the bush are at their most succulent. This is time told through the language of the environment. The Gagaju people of what is now Kakadu National Park, for instance, do not recognize 4 European-style seasons. They live by 6 distinct periods, each defined by clear, observable changes in their monsoonal homeland. There is Gajug, the monsoon season, when the heat and humidity bring forth torrential rains, electrical storms, and an explosion of new plant growth. This is followed by Banjareng, the knock-em-down storm season, when fierce winds flatten the speargrass and the floodwaters begin to recede. Then comes Yeg, the cooler but still humid season, when Aboriginal people would traditionally move to the woodlands to hunt, as the plains were still too wet. This is a calendar of direct experience, a continuous conversation with the wind, the water, the plants, and the animals. This knowledge was not stored in libraries but carried in songlines, the intricate oral maps of the land that are passed down through stories, dances, and songs across countless generations. A songline is more than a route, it is a living encyclopedia. As you sing the song of a particular tract of country, you are not just remembering a path, you are reciting the locations of waterholes, the names and uses of plants, the behavior of animals, and crucially, the seasonal changes that affect them all. The calendar is embedded within this epic poem of place. To know the song is to know that when the woolly bush flowers, it is time to harvest the lily seeds in the billabong, and that this coincides with the time when the male turtles are fighting in the rivers, making them easier to catch. This intergenerational transfer of knowledge ensured that the entire community, not just a few specialists, understood the subtle signs of seasonal shift and could make collective decisions that ensured sustainability. It represents a form of timekeeping that is inherently conservative, designed to protect resources rather than exploit them. This world, you presents a fundamental challenge to the Western concept of time as a universal, abstract, and linear constant. a thing that can be sliced into identical, measurable units and applied uniformly everywhere. In the Aboriginal Australian context, time is local, relational, and specific. A season does not change on the same date for everyone across the continent. It changes when the specific indicators for that particular ecosystem say it does. A calendar for the desert peoples of Central Australia would be useless to the saltwater people of the Torres Strait because their environmental cues are completely different. This reveals a philosophy where humans are not separate from nature, imposing their own order upon it, but are active, participatory members of a complex ecological community. Time is a property of the relationship between all things. This deeply holistic perspective, refined over thousands of generations, offers a powerful lesson in observation, adaptation, and respect. It shows us that a calendar can be far more than a tool for organization. It can be a covenant with the land itself, a promise to listen and to live in harmony with the rhythms of the world we inhabit. From the sun-baked deserts of Australia, we journey now to the frozen fjords and deep forests of medieval Scandinavia, where time was not told through environmental cues alone, but was carved into wood with the ancient symbols of the runes. Here, the calendar was not a public monument or a priestly scroll. It was a personal, portable object, often a simple wooden staff or a flat stick that could be carried by a farmer, a trader, or a housewife. These were the runic calendars or primstavs, and they represent a fascinating fusion of the deeply practical and the powerfully mythological, a tangible record of how time was woven into the very grain of everyday Viking life and its enduring legacy. The design of a primstav is a masterpiece of intuitive engineering. Imagine a long, rectangular stick of wood, perhaps the length of your forearm, with two main sides. One edge, often called the summer side, was carved with the runes and symbols for the period from the spring equinox around April 14th to the autumn equinox around October 14th. The other edge, the winter side, covered the other half of the year. Instead of numbered days, the year was divided into a series of cycles based on the moon's phases. Each month contained approximately 30 days, and to keep this lunar count aligned with the solar year, the Norse calendar masters employed a clever system. Every few years they would add an extra week, a leap week, to correct the drift. This was a complex calculation managed not by a centralized authority, but by local timekeepers, showing a decentralized yet highly effective grasp of celestial mechanics. Each day on the stick was marked by a small groove or a hole, and every seventh day, a slightly larger mark denoted what we would now call a week. But the true magic lies in the symbols carved next to certain days, not numbers, but tiny pictograms that served as a visual memory aid for what that day signified. This is where the calendar transforms from a simple tracker into a cultural storyteller. The symbols are a direct window into the Norse world. A small carving of a wheel might mark the winter solstice festival of Yule, a celebration of the sun's return that involved feasting and the lighting of a great Yule log. A symbol of a fish could indicate the start of the spring herring run, a crucial event for both sustenance and trade. A carving of a pair of shoes might mark the day when the roads were finally firm enough after the spring thaw to begin traveling again. And powerfully, a symbol of a hammer, the mighty Mjolnir of the god Thor, could mark a day sacred to him, a day for asking for protection and strength. These were not arbitrary decorations. They were a functional, mnemonic system that allowed an often non-literate society to keep its complex annual rhythm perfectly synchronized with the needs of survival, commerce, and faith. What makes the primstav so historically compelling is that it is a fossilized record of a profound cultural transition. Many of these calendars were created and used in the centuries after the official conversion of Scandinavia to Christianity, and they bear the marks of both worlds. You might find the feast day of a Christian saint like St. Olaf carved right alongside the pagan celebration of the summer solstice. The ancient Norse month names like Thori and Goi often persisted next to the new Latin ones. This was not necessarily a conflict. It was a pragmatic and gradual blending, a way for a people to hold onto the familiar rhythms of their ancestral world while incorporating the new requirements of their adopted religion. The primstav became a tool of continuity, a way to navigate a changing spiritual landscape without losing the practical wisdom of the old ways. It shows us that a calendar is not just a way to track time, but a way for a culture to negotiate its own identity, preserving the stories of Thor and the old gods even as it began to pray to a new one. In the notches of a simple wooden stick, we see the entire saga of a people finding their way through time. This purely lunar rhythm stands in stark contrast to the solar and agricultural calendars we've explored, like Egypt's or Rome's. While those systems anchored human activity to the seasons of the earth, the Hijri calendar elevates the community's focus to the cycles of the heavens, creating a sacred timeline that operates independently of the natural world. Each month begins not with a calculation, but with the actual physical sighting of the crescent moon, a practice that ties the community together in a shared act of observation and declaration. This lunar year is approximately 11 days shorter than the solar year, which means that over a 33-year cycle, a month like Ramadan will journey through all the seasons. Imagine fasting from dawn to dusk during the long, hot days of a summer in Saudi Arabia, and then, years later, experiencing a winter Ramadan where the days are short and cool. This constant migration is not seen as an inconvenience, but as a profound feature of the system. It teaches resilience, empathy, and a detachment from the comforts of a fixed, predictable routine, reinforcing the core Islamic principle of submission to a divine plan that is beyond human manipulation or full comprehension. The calendar's very starting point, the Hijra, the migration of the Prophet Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Medina in the year 622 of the Common Era, cements its purpose as a marker of faith, not farming or politics. This event did not mark a military victory or the birth of a king. It marked the moment a persecuted community found the freedom to practice its faith and establish a society based on Islamic principles. Time itself for a Muslim is measured from this spiritual rebirth. The two most significant religious observances, the month of fasting, Ramadan, and the month of pilgrimage, Dhul al-Hijjah, are entirely governed by this lunar clock. The experience of Ramadan is universalized by this system. A Muslim in Indonesia and a Muslim in Canada begin and end their fast on the same days, united by a celestial event that transcends national borders and time zones, creating a powerful global ummah or community synchronized in worship. This creates a fascinating duality for many Muslims living in the modern world, who often navigate two parallel timelines: the Gregorian calendar for their secular, professional, and civic lives, and the Hijri for their spiritual and personal rituals. The wandering nature of Islamic months means that a child might celebrate their birthday on the same Gregorian date every year, but their age in the Hijri system will advance on a different, moving date. More importantly, the spiritual benefits associated with certain times of year, like the last 10 nights of Ramadan, are not confined to one season. A believer will have the opportunity to seek these blessings during the stillness of winter, the freshness of spring, and the languid heat of summer within their lifetime, experiencing the divine in every facet of the earthly cycle. This system is a constant, gentle reminder that the ultimate reality is not the physical world we inhabit, with its seasons and harvests, but the timeless, unchanging realm of the divine. The Hijri calendar is perhaps the most powerful example we have of a timekeeping system designed not to master the environment, but to transcend it, orienting an entire civilization toward a sacred horizon that is always in view, yet forever just beyond the grasp of the sun. Now imagine two great celestial gears turning at different speeds, one with 260 teeth and the other with 365, interlocking only once every 52 years. This is the essence of the Mesoamerican calendar round, a breathtakingly complex and elegant system that wove together the sacred and the secular into a single, unified fabric of time. For the Maya, the Aztecs, and other cultures of the region, this was not merely a way to mark the days. It was the fundamental operating system of the universe, a mechanism that required constant human engagement to keep the cosmos from grinding to a halt. The system's genius lies in the combination of two distinct cycles. The first is the 260-day sacred calendar, known to the Maya as the Tzolk'in. This wasn't based on any obvious astronomical cycle like the sun or moon. Instead, it was a period deeply rooted in mythology, possibly connected to the 9-month human gestation period or the cycles of the planet Venus. This calendar consisted of 20-day names like Imix water lizard or Ben Reed, paired with the numbers 1 through 13. This created 260 unique combinations, each day carrying its own specific spiritual energy, its own portents for good or ill. This was the count used by priests for divination, for naming children, and for determining the most auspicious days for everything from planting a field to going to war. A day was not a blank slate. It had a personality, a destiny, dictated by its position in this sacred wheel. Running concurrently was the 365-day solar year, the Hab. This was the vague year, as it did not account for the extra quarter day, meaning it slowly drifted relative to the actual solar year over centuries. It was divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus a final, dreaded 5-day period known as the Wayeb to the Maya or the Nemonteme to the Aztecs. These were 5 days outside the normal flow of time, considered empty and profoundly dangerous, a period when the veil between worlds was thin and malevolent spirits could cross over. People would often stay indoors, avoiding any significant work or activity for fear of attracting misfortune. The Hab anchored society to the agricultural seasons, dictating the timing of planting, harvesting, and the great communal festivals that celebrated the sun's journey. The true magic and the source of the calendar round's immense power happened when these two cycles were meshed together. Since 260 and 365 have no common factors, a specific combination of a Tzolk'in date and a Hab date would not repeat for a period of 18,980 days, or exactly 52 vague solar years. This 52-year cycle was the calendar round, and its completion was a moment of supreme cosmic significance across Mesoamerica. As the final, ill-omened Nemonteme days of the 52nd year drew to a close, a terrifying uncertainty gripped the entire civilization. Would the gods permit the cycles to continue? Would the sun rise again? Or was this the end of the current world age? To ensure the sun's rebirth and the renewal of time itself, the Aztecs performed the most vital of all rituals, the new fire ceremony. On a sacred mountain overlooking the Valley of Mexico, every fire in every home and temple was extinguished. Priests would then wait in the darkness, their eyes fixed on the star cluster we call the Pleiades. If it passed directly overhead, it was a sign the world would continue. A new fire was then kindled in the chest of a sacrificial victim, and from this single divine flame, runners would carry torches to relight the hearths of every community, symbolically rebirthing the world for another 52-year cycle. This profound belief in cyclical time and the necessity of human ritual to maintain cosmic balance is immortalized in one of the most iconic artifacts of the ancient world, the Aztec sunstone, often mistakenly called the calendar stone. This massive 12-foot-wide carved disc is not a functioning calendar but a symbolic representation of the Aztec cosmos and its cycles of destruction and rebirth. At its center is the face of the sun god Tanatia, surrounded by 4 square panels depicting the 4 previous world ages, or suns, each of which was destroyed by a different cataclysm: jaguars, wind, fire, and flood. The current era, the 5th sun, is held in the center, and the Aztecs believed its survival depended on a continuous offering of the sacred energy found in human blood. The stone's intricate rings contain the signs of the 20 days of the sacred month and other cosmological symbols, all encircled by 2 great fire serpents representing the cycle of time itself. It is a permanent stone declaration that time is not a straight line but a series of repeating, precarious epochs, each requiring immense effort and sacrifice to sustain. The calendar round and the philosophy it embodies show us a civilization that saw itself not as the master of time, but as its humble and essential partner, actively participating in a divine dance to keep the universe in motion. While many ancient calendars sought to align human activity with the cycles of nature or the cosmos, the Hebrew calendar performs a different, equally vital function. It binds a people to their history and to a sacred promise. This is a lunisolar system of extraordinary ingenuity, where months are determined by the renewed crescent moon, but years are periodically adjusted with an extra month to keep the spring festival of Passover anchored to its proper season. This delicate balancing act between the moon's 29.5-day cycle and the sun's 365-day journey isn't just an astronomical feat, it is a theological necessity. For time itself, in Jewish tradition, is the stage upon which God's covenant with his people unfolds, a series of appointed moments, or modim, that are not merely commemorated but actually re-entered and experienced anew by each generation. The rhythm of the year is fundamentally a rhythm of remembrance. Each major holiday is a portal to a pivotal moment in the biblical narrative, transforming abstract history into a tangible, sensory reality. Passover, or Pesach, is not simply a date on a page marking the exodus from Egypt. It is an experience. For 7 or 8 days, leavened bread is removed from the home, and families gather for the Seder meal, where they taste bitter herbs to recall the bitterness of slavery and chew unleavened matzah to remember the hurried flight to freedom. Similarly, Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, requires families to build and dwell in a temporary, flimsy hut for a week. This isn't a quaint camping trip. It is a physical reenactment of the 40 years of wandering in the desert, a visceral lesson in vulnerability and divine protection. The calendar ensures these events are not fossilized in the past but are living encounters, ensuring that a child asking the 4 questions at the Seder table is not just learning about history but is stepping into it, becoming a part of the very story they are recounting. This sanctification of time is deeply rooted in the Talmud, the vast repository of Jewish law and lore, which contains intricate discussions on the mathematical formulae for calculating the new moon and the rules for intercalating the leap year. The Sanhedrin, the ancient Supreme Court, would base its declaration of a new month on the testimony of witnesses who had spotted the nascent crescent moon. This was not a cold, automated process. It was a communal event, a legal and spiritual procedure that wove human observation directly into the divine order. Even after a fixed calendar was established by Hillel II in the 4th century to ensure unity among dispersed communities, the underlying principle remained: human beings are active partners with God in the ongoing work of creation, and that partnership includes the very measurement and sanctification of time itself. The calendar, therefore, becomes a mechanism for weaving the human and the divine together into a single, sacred tapestry. The result is a profound sense of identity and continuity that has sustained the Jewish people through centuries of dispersion and persecution. No matter where in the world they found themselves, in the Ashtateles of Eastern Europe, the Mellahs of North Africa, or the modern cities of America, the calendar provided a shared, unwavering rhythm. When Jews in Shanghai lit Hanukkah candles during the Second World War, or those in the Soviet Union secretly baked matzah in their kitchens, they were doing more than observing a tradition. They were asserting their place in a story that transcended geography and political circumstance. They were aligning their personal lives with the same covenantal timeline that had guided their ancestors for millennia. The Hebrew calendar is perhaps the ultimate example of timekeeping as an act of defiance against historical erasure, a deliberate, continuous choice to remember, to sanctify, and to belong to a story that is both ancient and eternally new. While many cultures saw their timekeeping systems transformed by conquest, trade, or the sweeping reforms of foreign powers, one nation's calendar has remained a steadfast beacon of independence, preserved for centuries by a combination of geography, faith, and fierce cultural pride. In the highlands of Ethiopia, time itself follows a different rhythm. Here, as the rest of the world navigates the 21st century according to the Gregorian system, the Ethiopian calendar confidently reads the year 2016. This isn't a mistake or a quaint anachronism. It's a living link to an ancient past, a deliberate and profound declaration of a unique identity that has resisted the homogenizing pressures of globalization. To step into Ethiopia is to step into a different temporal stream, one that flows from the very heart of the ancient world. The structure of this calendar is a fascinating artifact in its own right. It consists of 12 months of exactly 30 days each, a beautifully even division that harkens back to an older, more idealized astronomical model. But with 360 days accounted for, what of the remaining 5 or 6? These are gathered into a 13th month, a short period of 5 days, or 6 in a leap year known as Pagm. This isn't treated as an afterthought but as a distinct and meaningful part of the year, a time often associated with reflection, transition, and community gatherings. The new year, called Inqutatash, arrives not in the deep winter or the height of summer, but on the 11th of September in the Gregorian calendar, or the 12th following a leap year. This date is far from arbitrary. It marks the end of the long, drenching rainy season known as the Qiyamah. As the skies clear and the Ethiopian highlands erupt in a blanket of brilliant yellow daisies, the celebration of Inqutatash is a joyous affirmation of renewal, sunshine, and hope, deeply connected to the land's own cycle of rebirth. This unique system is a direct descendant of the ancient Alexandrian calendar, a computation method established by the astronomers of Hellenistic Egypt. While much of the Christian world eventually adopted the revised calculations behind the Gregorian calendar, Ethiopia's powerful Orthodox Tewahedo Church, a bedrock of national identity for over a millennium, held fast to the old calculations. The country's formidable mountainous terrain, which earned it the nickname the Fortress Empire, played a crucial role in this preservation. It acted as a natural barrier, not only repelling would-be colonizers, but also insulating its cultural and religious institutions from external influence. This isolation meant that the calendar, like the nation itself, developed along its own distinct path. its rhythms dictating the timing of religious fasts, festivals, and daily life for the vast majority of the population. The Ethiopian calendar is far more than a quirky alternative. It is a powerful symbol of resilience. In a world where global commerce and communication increasingly operate on a single, standardized time, the conscious maintenance of a local chronology is an act of cultural defiance. It is a daily, lived reminder that the values, history, and worldview of one's community hold weight against international norms. Every time an Ethiopian citizen writes the date, celebrates a holiday, or observes a religious festival according to this ancient rhythm, they are participating in an unbroken chain of tradition that stretches back over 1,500 years. This calendar is a testament to the idea that time is not a universal constant to be imposed, but a deeply personal and cultural experience, woven from the threads of shared history, faith, and an enduring connection to a specific place under the sun. While other empires imposed their calendars as tools of control, the Armenian people crafted theirs as a shield, a deliberate, sophisticated act of cultural preservation in the face of centuries of foreign domination. Nestled at the crossroads of empires where the ambitions of Rome, Persia, Byzantium, and the Ottomans constantly collided, Armenia developed a unique solar calendar that became far more than a way to mark the days. It became a fortress for the national soul, a silent, persistent declaration that they were still here and they would not be erased. This system, refined over millennia and used well into the Middle Ages, was a solar year of beautiful mathematical symmetry. It consisted of 12 months, each exactly 30 days long, creating a 360-day year. To reconcile this with the true solar year of 365 and a quarter days, they added a special 5-day period at the end of the year, known as the Orlites, or epagomenal days. This structure reveals a society with advanced astronomical understanding, but its true power lay not in its precision, but in its purpose. Each of those 12 months was given a name that resonated deeply with the Armenian experience and environment. They were not abstract numbers or named after foreign gods and emperors, but after ancient Armenian deities, seasonal agricultural activities, and foundational national festivals. The first month, Navasad, marked the Armenian New Year and was dedicated to the god of wisdom and writing, a poignant emphasis on the value of knowledge and culture. Another month, Ahekan, was named for the fires lit during the midwinter celebration dedicated to the god of fire. This wasn't just scheduling, it was a way of weaving the very landscape, mythology, and seasonal rhythms of the Armenian highlands into the fabric of time itself. Every time a farmer noted the month of Meri, associated with the turning of the year, or prepared for the month of Mehekan, a time of ancient festivities, they were unconsciously reinforcing a connection to their land and their ancestors, regardless of which foreign power currently claimed political sovereignty over them. This deeply embedded national rhythm faced its greatest test and found its most profound role with the nation's conversion to Christianity in the early 4th century. Here, the calendar performed a breathtaking act of cultural synthesis. Instead of being discarded as a pagan relic, it was skillfully adapted by the newly established Armenian Apostolic Church. The ancient pagan festivals were not erased. They were often rebranded and infused with new Christian meaning, their dates preserved within the old calendar framework. The timing of major liturgical events, Easter, Christmas, and the vast array of Saints' Day feasts was calculated according to this distinct Armenian system, which often placed these holidays on different dates than those celebrated in Constantinople or Rome. This created a powerful parallel universe of time. While an Armenian citizen might have had to pay taxes to a Persian Shah or an Ottoman Sultan according to the Islamic calendar, and while merchants might have to reckon with the Byzantine date for trade, the heartbeat of their spiritual and communal life, their baptisms, their weddings, their memorials, their fasts and feasts all pulse to the unique rhythm of the Armenian calendar. This duality made the calendar a core pillar of the Church, and the Church was the primary institution that safeguarded Armenian language and identity through long periods without an independent state. The ultimate testament to the calendar's role as a tool of resistance came during the darkest chapters of Armenian history, particularly under successive waves of foreign rule. When speaking the Armenian language in public could be dangerous, and when the teaching of national history was suppressed, the calendar operated as a covert language of continuity. A grandmother whispering to her granddaughter about the traditions of the month of Navasad was passing down a 4,000-year-old heritage. A priest announcing the date for the Feast of the Transfiguration according to the Armenian calculation was making a quiet but defiant statement of spiritual independence. The calendar became a living archive, a perpetual reminder that their story was older than the empires that ruled them, and that their sense of time was rooted in their own soil. It fostered an unbreakable sense of cohesion among a people scattered across the globe, a shared temporal anchor that could be carried anywhere, a homeland not just of place but of time. In this way, the ancient Armenian calendar transcends its function as a mere timekeeping device. It stands as a monumental lesson in endurance, demonstrating how the very measurement of days can be forged into a shield for language, a banner for faith, and an eternal declaration of a people's unwavering right to their own past, present, and future. Imagine an entire society across a chain of islands, collectively setting down its weapons and turning its attention from conflict to cultivation, from conquest to community. For 4 sacred months, the rhythm of life in traditional Hawaii was fundamentally transformed, governed not by the ambitions of chiefs but by the turning of the seasons and the will of the god Lono. This was the Makahiki, a magnificent New Year festival that was far more than a simple celebration. It was a complete recalibration of society, a time when the very laws of the land were rewritten to prioritize peace, abundance, and ecological renewal. In a world often driven by relentless growth and competition, the Hawaiian Makahiki cycle stands as a powerful testament to a different way of being, one where time itself was structured to enforce balance and harmony between people and the land that sustained them. The festival's timing was precisely attuned to nature's clock. It began in the Hawaiian month of Welahu, around October or November in the Gregorian calendar, with the first sighting of the Pleiades star cluster, known to Hawaiians as Makali, rising at sunset. This celestial event signaled the start of the rainy season and the beginning of a 4-month period of rest and regeneration for both the land and its people. The most profound and radical rule of the Makahiki was the strict prohibition of war. All conflict was suspended. Warriors laid down their arms, and a sacred peace known as Ko Koa, or My War is Suspended, blanketed the islands. This wasn't a mere suggestion, it was a divine mandate. The only warfare permitted was the symbolic sporting competitions that would become a central part of the festivities. This enforced peace created a stable, predictable environment for the most critical civic process of the year, the collection of the annual tribute, or Quipu. This was not a tax collected by force, but a religious offering and a redistribution of wealth. A procession of priests bearing the image of the god Lono would circumnavigate each island in a clockwise direction. As they traveled from district to district, the people would present their offerings at designated altars. These weren't just payments to the chief, they were gifts to Lono himself, acknowledgments of his role in providing fertility and rain. The offerings were a tangible measure of the land's productivity, long, straight-lie kolo taro from the pond fields, finely woven mats, huge quantities of Uola's sweet potato, prized pigs, and magnificent bolts of copper cloth. This collection served multiple purposes. It stocked the chiefly storehouses, which would then be used to feed the people during festivals and in times of scarcity. It was a practical census of the island's resources, and perhaps most importantly, it was a powerful, physical ritual that reinforced the reciprocal relationship between the people, their chiefs, and the gods. The well-being of all was literally gathered together in one place, a visible manifestation of the community's collective wealth and health. Once the tribute was collected, the focus shifted to celebration, competition, and deep spiritual renewal. This was a time for games or makahiki sports that were far more than simple entertainment. They were tests of strength, skill, and agility that served as a non-lethal outlet for competitive energy and a way to identify and train the next generation of leaders. Contests included foot races, sledding down grassy hills on Papaholua, bowling with stone discs, and the famous O'Aya, where warriors demonstrated their prowess by deflecting spears thrown at them. Through these games, social bonds were strengthened, and individual excellence was celebrated within a framework of communal joy. The entire period was also one of intense kapu, or sacred restrictions, focused on lono. Certain practices associated with the god of war, Ku, were set aside. This spiritual shift emphasized fertility, rain, and cultivation, mirroring the natural world's shift into its productive, rainy season. The makahiki culminated in the ceremony of Kali, a ritualized battle where the chief would symbolically reaffirm his right to rule by ritually defeating Lono, signaling the end of the god's visit and the peaceful season. With the first new moon after the makahiki ended, the kapu of Lono were lifted, the priests of Ku resumed their rituals, and the season of war could theoretically begin again. But only after the land and the people had been given 4 full months to rest, replenish, and remember their deepest connections to each other and to the Aina, the land that fed them. Long before the gears of the Antikythera Mechanism turned or the stones of the Mayan temples were carved, in the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humanity was taking its first tentative steps toward a revolution that would change everything, the invention of the city. And with the city came a new problem, one that no hunter-gatherer or small village had ever needed to solve: how to coordinate the lives of thousands of people living on top of one another. The answer, unearthed in the ancient Sumerian city of Nippur, was not a grand palace or a new weapon, but something far more profound: a calendar. This was not a calendar of philosophy or cosmic cycles, but a brutally practical tool for making urban life possible. Found on thousands of cuneiform tablets dating back to around 2,500 years before the Common Era, the Nippur calendar is our earliest detailed window into how time itself became a resource to be managed, the essential administrative glue that held the world's first complex civilization together. The structure of this calendar reveals its utterly pragmatic soul. It was strictly lunar, with each month beginning at the first sighting of the crescent moon. But unlike the Babylonian system that would later add complex intercalation for divination, the Sumerian solution was beautifully simple. When the lunar months drifted too far from the agricultural seasons, the city's rulers would simply declare an extra month, often right in the middle of the year, to pull the calendar back into alignment with the critical cycles of planting and harvest. This was timekeeping for survival. The names of the months themselves are a direct echo of this purpose. They were not dedicated to gods or kings, but to the most vital agricultural and economic tasks that needed to be performed. One month was simply month of barley eating, another was month of the harvest festival, Yet another was month of directions, likely when the annual accounting was done and new instructions were issued from the temple to the field hands. The entire year was a to-do list etched into clay, a constant reminder that the survival of the city's thousands of inhabitants depended on everyone doing the right thing at the right time. This is where the calendar transforms from a simple farmer's almanac into the world's first administrative operating system. The vast temple complexes at the heart of Sumerian cities like Nippur were not just places of worship. They were the central banks, the tax collection agencies, the warehouses, and the distribution centers for the entire society. They managed enormous estates, herds of livestock, and legions of workers. To do this, they needed a standardized official timeline. Cuneiform tablets detail how the calendar dictated the rhythm of civic life. On a specific day of the month, farmers who rented land from the temple were required to bring their share of the barley harvest to the central granaries. On another set day, the temple administrators would distribute rations of grain, oil, and wool to the thousands of workers who toiled for the institution: scribes, priests, cooks, brewers, and laborers. The calendar scheduled the maintenance of the city's crucial irrigation canals, a task that required massive, coordinated labor efforts at the right time of year. It even dictated when certain court cases could be heard. Time was no longer a natural cycle to be observed. It was a grid to be imposed, a system of deadlines and appointments that allowed for the predictable functioning of a complex economy. This innovation represents a seismic shift in human consciousness. In the Sumerian city, time became a unit of economic measurement. A worker's labor was quantified by the days they worked. The interest on a loan of barley was calculated per month. The calendar allowed the temple bureaucracy to plan, to budget, and to hold people accountable. It turned the chaotic, unpredictable flow of natural time into a regulated, predictable commodity that could be divided, allocated, and controlled. This was the birth of time management, not as a personal productivity hack, but as a fundamental principle of state power. The ability to declare what time it was and to demand that certain actions be performed by that time was a form of authority as potent as any army. The humble calendar from Nippur shows us that the very first cities were not just collections of buildings and people. They were intricate machines, and the calendar was the clockwork that kept all their moving parts synchronized, proving that the greatest invention of early civilization was not the wheel but the schedule. But while the Sumerians used their calendar to manage the granaries of a single city-state, the Byzantine Empire, the eastern heir to Rome, faced a far greater challenge, administering a vast multi-ethnic realm stretching from Italy to Syria. To solve this, they developed a timekeeping system of breathtaking bureaucratic ingenuity, one that had less to do with the moon or the sun and everything to do with the bottom line. This was the Indiction cycle, a 15-year period that became the fundamental heartbeat of the Byzantine economy, and a powerful reminder that time is not just measured in seasons or sacred days, but in taxes owed and debts come due. The origins of this system are wonderfully practical, rooted in the late Roman Empire's need for predictable revenue. The term indiction itself comes from the Latin indictio, meaning declaration or announcement. Every autumn, imperial officials would announce the tax assessment for the following year. But to bring order to this annual ritual, they grouped these years into larger blocks of 15. This cycle wasn't based on any celestial phenomenon. It was a purely human invention, an administrative convenience. A 15-year period was long enough to allow for long-term planning and debt structuring, yet short enough to remain relevant to a single human lifetime. It provided a stable, repeating framework that everyone from the wealthiest landowner in Anatolia to the smallest olive farmer in Greece could understand and anticipate. Their tax liability, their lease agreements, and even some legal contracts were all pegged to the year of the indiction. In a world without universal birth certificates or standardized identification, your place within this 15-year wheel was a crucial marker of your civic and economic identity. What makes the Byzantine system so fascinating is how it layered this secular, fiscal timekeeping directly on top of its rich religious calendar. The empire didn't choose one or the other, it operated with both simultaneously. A Byzantine citizen would have known that it was the year 6496 since the creation of the world according to the Byzantine calendar, the third year of the reign of Emperor Justinian, and the 11th year of the current Indiction cycle. This created a dual consciousness of time. One timeline was sacred, tracing the feast days of the saints, the movable date of Easter, and the rhythm of liturgical hours. The other was profoundly secular, governing the inescapable demands of the state treasury. This fusion was the very essence of the Byzantine worldview, where the emperor was God's vice-regent on earth and the state was a sacred institution. The smooth collection of taxes wasn't just an economic necessity, it was a duty that supported the empire, which was itself a bulwark of Christianity. The Indiction cycle, therefore, wasn't a profane intrusion on sacred time, but another divinely sanctioned rhythm, a way of embedding one's fiscal responsibilities into a larger, God-given order. The legacy of this system is etched all over the surviving documents from the medieval world. Thousands of papyri from Egypt, parchment charters from Italy, and stone inscriptions across the Balkans are dated primarily by their indiction year. A land deed might be written in the 7th indiction, making its place in the fiscal cycle more immediately important for legal purposes than the name of the emperor or the year of his reign. This practice was so entrenched that it outlived the Byzantine Empire itself, persisting in parts of Europe well into the 15th century. The indiction cycle shows us with stunning clarity that a calendar can be a tool of immense soft power. By standardizing time around the tax year, the Byzantine state didn't just make accounting easier, it synchronized the entire economy to the rhythm of its own treasury, making the fiscal health of the empire a predictable, recurring event that everyone participated in. It turned the abstract passage of years into a measurable economic unit, proving that the most powerful clock in an empire isn't always the one that tells the hours, but the one that tells you when to pay up. High in the Himalayas, where the air is thin and the sky feels intimately close, time is not a mere sequence of events but a living, breathing force woven from the threads of astrology, medicine, and deep spiritual practice. The Tibetan calendar is a magnificent tapestry of this holistic worldview, a lunisolar system that masterfully synthesizes ancient wisdom from its neighbors. From Indian Vedic astrology, it draws its complex calculations of planetary movements. From Chinese tradition, it incorporates the 12 animal signs and the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. But these components are not merely borrowed, they are fully integrated into a unique Buddhist framework, creating a tool that sees each moment as a unique confluence of cosmic energies, each with the potential to heal or harm, to create obstacles or open pathways. This system is far more than a way to mark the days for religious festivals, though it does so with great precision. Its true power lies in its role as a practical guide for daily living, a protective and predictive instrument used by everyone from farmers and merchants to doctors and monks. Before breaking ground on a new home, a family will consult an astrologer to calculate the most auspicious day, ensuring the building's energy aligns with that of the land and its inhabitants. A doctor trained in traditional Tibetan medicine will use the calendar to diagnose illness, believing that the balance of the body's 3 humors, wind, bile, and phlegm, is directly influenced by the phases of the moon and the movements of the planets. Even the timing of taking medicine or undergoing a specific treatment is often determined by this celestial clock, with the belief that a remedy's efficacy is heightened when administered in harmony with these greater forces. At the heart of this practice is the profound belief that time is not a neutral, empty container. A day is not a blank slate. Each day carries a specific energy signature, a personality defined by the complex interplay of that day's animal sign, element, and the planets presiding over it. Some days are naturally inclined toward success and are perfect for starting new ventures or embarking on a journey. Others might be fraught with conflict and are better suited for introspection or completing old tasks. There are days when the energy is ideal for spiritual practices, and others where it is wiser to focus on mundane chores. This knowledge empowers individuals to move with the current of time rather than against it, making choices that harness favorable conditions and avoid potential pitfalls. It's a form of cosmic navigation, a way to sail the river of time with awareness and grace, using the calendar as one's chart. This deeply interwoven view of time, health, and the cosmos offers a stark and beautiful contrast to modern, Western notions of time as a uniform, quantifiable resource to be managed and spent. In the Tibetan worldview, you cannot save time, you can only synchronize with it. A watch tells you what hour it is, but the Tibetan calendar tells you what kind of hour it is. It presents a universe that is alive, intelligent, and communicative, where the positions of celestial bodies are not cold, mechanical facts but meaningful signals about the state of the world and our place within it. This calendar is a testament to a culture that seeks not to conquer nature or master time, but to listen to it, to learn its language, and to live in a conscious, respectful, and harmonious relationship with the intricate and energetic dance of the entire universe. Yet for all its terrifying grandeur, the Aztec system forces a difficult but vital question upon us. How could a civilization capable of such precise astronomical observation, such artistic brilliance, and such complex urban organization also embrace a practice that seems so alien and brutal to the modern mind? The answer lies in a fundamental difference in how they perceived reality itself. For the Aztecs, the universe was not a stable, self-sustaining machine. It was a fragile, dynamic equilibrium, a constant state of becoming that required a continuous input of the most precious energy in existence, the life force found in human blood, or chalchahuath, meaning precious water. The gods had sacrificed themselves to create this world, and in a reciprocal act of cosmic debt, humanity was obligated to nourish them with the same substance. Without these offerings, the sun would cease its journey across the sky, the rains would fail, and the entire cosmos would collapse back into primordial chaos. A calendar, therefore, was not just a schedule for planting maize. It was a literal timetable for feeding the deities, a meticulous plan to stave off the apocalypse one heartbeat at a time. This profound sense of obligation and fear is masterfully encoded on the most iconic relic of the Aztec world, the Stone of the Sun, often mistakenly called the Aztec calendar stone. This colossal, 12-foot-wide monolith is not a functioning calendar but a dense cosmological diagram, a stone sermon explaining the nature of time and the price of its continuation. At its center glares the face of the sun god Tenatia, his tongue a flint knife demanding sustenance. His clawed hands grasp human hearts. Surrounding him are 4 square panels, each depicting one of the 4 previous world ages, or suns, that were destroyed by jaguars, wind, fire, and flood. The current era, the 5th sun, called the Sun of Movement, is held in the center, and the Aztecs believed it was destined to be destroyed by catastrophic earthquakes. The entire intricate mechanism of the calendar, with its cycles of 52 years, is carved around this central image, all encircled by two great fire serpents descending from the outer edge. The entire monument is a stark, permanent declaration that the world exists on borrowed time, and that its continued movement depends on a sacred contract of blood. To see the Zupo Yuali as merely a system of brutal superstition is to miss its terrifying internal logic. The sacrificial rituals, often performed on the summits of towering pyramids like the Templo Maya in the heart of Tenochtitlan, were acts of profound responsibility. The victims, often prisoners of war from the infamous Flowery Wars, fought specifically to capture offerings for the gods, were not merely executed. They were treated as living embodiments of the deities themselves, honored and revered before their ultimate transformation. Their journey to the top of the temple was a final, sacred procession. The act of sacrifice performed by priests with obsidian blades was seen as a release of this divine energy, a literal feeding of the sun and the earth. The blood was collected and offered to the idols, and the body, now an empty vessel, was often treated with respect and given to the warrior who captured the victim or to the victim's own family. In this worldview, the victim was not a passive sufferer but an active, essential participant in the maintenance of cosmic order, their death ensuring the continued life of the universe. The calendar ensured this precarious balance was maintained with unerring precision, scheduling these acts of ultimate offering to coincide with the moments of greatest celestial and agricultural need, weaving a cycle of life, death, and renewal into the very fabric of measured time. While many ancient calendars emerged organically from a culture's environment or mythology, the Baha'i calendar presents a fascinating modern counterpoint, a system intentionally designed from the ground up to shape a new kind of global consciousness. Introduced in the mid-19th century by the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, this calendar is not a relic of a forgotten past but a purposeful blueprint for a future its followers believe is inevitable. A world united in peace, recognizing the common spiritual foundation of all humanity. Its structure is a radical departure from the calendars of empires and isolated cultures, reflecting a vision where time itself becomes a tool for dismantling prejudice and building a global civilization. The mechanics of the calendar are a masterpiece of symbolic symmetry, deliberately breaking from historical precedents. The year is divided into 19 months, each containing 19 days. This creates a base of 361 days, to which are added 4 intercalary days, or 5 in a leap year, a special period of gift-giving, hospitality, and celebration that falls before the final month, a time of fasting. This 19-based system is profoundly significant. In the Baha'i tradition, the number 19 represents the unity of God and the unity of creation, a numerical symbol of the underlying oneness the faith seeks to manifest in the world. Each month is named after an attribute of God's splendor, glory, beauty, grandeur, so that the very act of saying the date becomes a daily meditation on a divine quality, orienting the individual's thoughts towards spiritual virtues. The new year, Nowruz, is fixed to the spring equinox in Tehran, the faith's spiritual center, a universal astronomical event that symbolizes renewal and rebirth for the entire planet, unshackled from any single nation's history or season. This carefully engineered structure is in service of a much larger goal, the gradual cultivation of a global identity. The Baha'i faith teaches the fundamental principle of the oneness of humankind, that all people are leaves of one tree and drops of one ocean. The calendar is a practical instrument for bringing this principle to life. Its holidays are not tied to the victory of one tribe or the birth of a national hero. Instead, they commemorate pivotal moments in the lives of the faith's central figures, moments that symbolize universal spiritual truths, the announcement of a prophetic mission, the covenant of unity, the promise of a coming age of peace. By adopting this shared rhythm, Baha'is around the world, from a community in Kenya to a neighborhood in Canada, simultaneously celebrate, fast, and pray on the same days. This synchronized spiritual practice creates a powerful, tangible experience of global unity, transcending national borders, ethnicities, and cultures. The calendar acts as a constant, gentle teacher, its recurring cycles reinforcing the ideals of equality, justice, and the abandonment of all forms of prejudice. In this way, the Baha'i calendar represents a bold and hopeful evolution in the story of timekeeping. For centuries, calendars were often instruments of separation, marking one people as distinct from, and sometimes superior to, another. They were tools of political power, agricultural necessity, or isolated religious observance. The Baha'i system, by contrast, is an aspirational project. It demonstrates that a calendar can be consciously crafted not to reflect a society as it is, but to help build the society its creators believe should be. It blends ancient wisdom, like its anchor to the solar year and its period of fasting, with a radically modern and inclusive vision. It stands as a powerful testament to the idea that how we measure our days is inseparable from what we value, and that by redesigning our relationship with time, we might just redesign our future, orienting our collective journey not toward a cyclical return to the past, but toward a linear progression into an age of global harmony and understanding. But this drive for a singular, universal time came at a profound cost. The spread of the Gregorian calendar was not a peaceful, voluntary adoption based on its superior accuracy. It was a story of imposition, a tool of cultural hegemony carried on the ships of colonizers and enforced by the authority of missionaries and merchants. As European empires carved up the globe, they brought their calendar with them as a non-negotiable component of their administration. Indigenous timekeeping systems, many of which were deeply woven into local ecology, spirituality, and social structure, were systematically suppressed, dismissed as pagan superstition or primitive nonsense. The sacred cycles of the Maya, the lunar observations of Islamic scholars, the agricultural rhythms of countless African and Asian cultures, all were forced to recede into the private sphere, if they survived at all, under the overwhelming pressure of this new official timeline. The Gregorian calendar became a powerful symbol of conquest, a way of saying that not only your land and your resources now belong to a foreign power, but your very perception of reality, your way of marking your own existence, was now invalid. It was a silent, relentless engine of cultural assimilation, reshaping global consciousness by standardizing the most fundamental rhythm of human life. Yet, to view this reform solely as an instrument of oppression is to miss its other, more pragmatic edge. The same uniformity that crushed cultural diversity also created unprecedented possibilities for global coordination. As international trade, scientific collaboration, and diplomacy expanded, a shared framework for scheduling became not just convenient but essential. A merchant in London could now arrange a shipment with a partner in Bombay with a mutually understood date. Scientists in different countries could coordinate observations of a transit of Venus. Diplomats could set a firm date for a treaty signing. The Gregorian calendar provided a neutral, if imposed, lingua franca for time that enabled the complex interactions of the modern world. This is the deep paradox at its heart. It is both a relic of colonial power and a foundational infrastructure of globalization. It delivered the incredible gift of synchronization while demanding the heavy price of homogenization, creating a world that can act together, but often at the expense of forgetting other, older ways of being in time. This history forces an uncomfortable but vital question for our interconnected era: whose time counts? The global dominance of the Gregorian system means that entire ways of understanding the universe, of relating to the environment, and of connecting with the divine have been marginalized or erased from public life. We have gained a powerful tool for efficiency, but we may have lost a wealth of wisdom about living in place-specific, sustainable rhythms. The modern international system operates on a single, abstract, quantified time, often divorced from the natural world it once sought to track. This prompts a necessary reflection on whether there is room in our globalized future for a more pluralistic conception of time, one that acknowledges the practical need for a common standard while also respecting and revitalizing the unique temporalities that give different cultures their distinct identity and connection to the cosmos. The story of the Gregorian calendar is not just about correcting a 10-minute error. It is about the power to define reality itself and the ongoing struggle between unity and diversity in how we choose to measure our lives. Yet, even as the Gregorian framework blankets the globe, a quiet but powerful counter-movement is taking root. In an age of digital saturation and environmental crisis, a growing number of people are looking backward to move forward, turning to the wisdom of abandoned timelines to re-enchant their relationship with time itself. This isn't about nostalgia. It's a conscious, often radical, act of seeking alternatives to the relentless, standardized tick of the global clock. From cultural revivalists to ecological activists, individuals and communities are reclaiming ancient calendars not as museum pieces, but as living tools to address the deep disconnections of modern life, searching for rhythms that feel more authentic, more humane, and more in tune with the natural world we so often ignore. This resurgence takes many forms, each with its own powerful motivation. For indigenous communities across the Americas and elsewhere, reviving ancestral calendars is a profound act of cultural reclamation and resistance. After centuries of colonial suppression that aimed to erase their languages, spiritual practices, and ways of knowing, restarting the Mayan Long Count or reinstating the ceremonial cycles of the Lakota or the Maori is a way to heal historical wounds and assert a continuous identity. It's a declaration that their time, their story, did not end with conquest. They are using these ancient systems to reconnect youth with their heritage, to guide agricultural practices that sustained their ancestors for millennia, and to celebrate festivals that reinforce community bonds severed by displacement and urbanization. This is timekeeping as cultural sovereignty, a way to stitch a people back into the fabric of their own history on their own terms. For others, particularly within environmental and wellness movements, the appeal is ecological and spiritual. The dominant Gregorian calendar is abstract and arbitrary, its months uneven and its connection to the natural world severed. In response, alternative systems like the 13-moon calendar have emerged, proposing a more harmonious model. This calendar, promoted by the Mayan-inspired dream spell movement, divides the year into 13 perfect months of 28 days each, resulting in 364 days with one extra day out of time for celebration and purification. This creates a rhythm that echoes the lunar cycle and the human biological clock more closely than our current chaotic schedule. Advocates argue that living by this natural time reduces stress, fosters a deeper connection to the Earth cycles, and offers a peaceful alternative to the frantic, growth-obsessed pace of industrial society. It's a calendar designed not for efficiency and profit, but for balance and wellness. This revival also represents a broader critique of the modern experience of time itself. In our digital era, time has become increasingly commodified, fragmented, and accelerated. Notifications interrupt our focus, work hours bleed into personal life, and the constant pressure to be productive leaves little room for reflection or ritual. Ancient calendars, by contrast, often present time as qualitative rather than quantitative. They recognize that all moments are not created equal, that there are times for action and times for rest, times for community gathering and times for solitary introspection. By adopting the Celtic wheel of the year with its 8 sabbats, or marking the lunar phases as in many pagan traditions, people are intentionally creating a more punctuated, meaningful, and rhythmic experience of the year. They are using these old systems to slow down, to mark the passage of time with intention through seasonal rituals, moon circles, and solar observances, building a sense of sacredness back into the mundane flow of days. Ultimately, this global reawakening to forgotten calendars is about more than just swapping one set of dates for another. It is a fundamental reimagining of our relationship with existence. It is a search for belonging to a culture, to a community, to the living earth. In a world that often feels alienating and disconnected, these ancient cycles offer a map back to a more integrated way of being. They remind us that time is not just a number on a screen or a line on a planner. It is the very medium through which we live our lives, and the rhythm we choose to live by shapes who we are. This growing movement suggests a deep, widespread yearning to break free from the monotony of globalized time and to find a rhythm that once again has a heartbeat, a rhythm that tells a story we actually want to be a part of. Each of these 25 systems is a key, carefully crafted to unlock the deepest truths of the civilization that created it. When we hold these keys, we don't just learn how a culture counted days, we learn how they thought, what they feared, and what they hoped for. We see that the very fabric of their reality was woven from threads of time, and by studying the patterns, we can begin to reconstruct entire worlds that history books have long forgotten. These calendars are not cold, dead artifacts. They are living testimonies to the incredible sophistication of societies we often mistakenly label as primitive. They force us to rewrite our understanding of the past, revealing networks of trade in shared astronomical knowledge, the subtle fingerprints of political power in a date, and the profound spiritual longing that connected a farmer in his field to the vast, star-filled cosmos above his head. The sheer intellectual power on display is humbling. The Antikythera Mechanism, with its intricate bronze gears calculating celestial movements, shatters the myth of ancient technological simplicity. The Mayan priests who could predict Venus cycles and solar eclipses with pinpoint accuracy were not mystics. They were scientists operating at a level of mathematical genius that would not be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. The builders of Stonehenge, who aligned massive monoliths to the solstices, and the Babylonian scribes who compiled encyclopedic tablets of astrological omens, all demonstrate a relentless, global human drive to observe, record, and comprehend the universe. This was not a passive curiosity. It was a rigorous, disciplined pursuit of knowledge driven by the most urgent of needs: to survive, to prosper, and to find one's place in a vast and often intimidating cosmos. Their calendars are their scientific journals, their astronomical charts, and their philosophical treatises, all rolled into one. Beyond the math and the mechanics, these systems reveal the emotional and spiritual core of a people. A calendar is a mirror held up to a culture's soul. For the Aztecs, the reflection was one of profound cosmic anxiety, a world perpetually on the brink of collapse that required the ultimate sacrifice to keep the sun rising. For the ancient Egyptians, it was a reflection of harmonious order, a confident society perfectly synchronized with the life-giving pulse of the Nile. The Chinese sexagenary cycle shows a culture seeking to align every human action with the moral energy of the universe, while the Aboriginal Australian seasonal calendars reflect a deep, poetic, and sustainable conversation with the living land. These were not just tools for scheduling, they were the operating systems for entire worldviews, providing a shared rhythm that told everyone who they were, what they valued, and how they should live. They answered the biggest questions of existence within the turning of a year. This incredible diversity of timekeeping, from the knotted cords of the Inca to the runic staves of the Norse, also tells a story of human adaptability. It proves that intelligence is not a single path but a branching tree of innovation. Without a written language, the Inca developed a three-dimensional, tactile database that managed an empire. Isolated by geography, the Ethiopians preserved an ancient calendar as a bulwark of their independence. The Celts, often dismissed by their Roman conquerors, used a complex bronze tablet to navigate a world alive with spiritual meaning. There is no one right way to be an advanced civilization. Every society, in its own unique context, solved the problem of time in a way that made sense for their environment, their beliefs, and their needs. This variety is a powerful antidote to the idea of linear progress, showing us that different paths can lead to equally profound and valid understandings of the world. Ultimately, the most important lesson these forgotten calendars teach us is about fragility and resilience. They are evidence of civilizations that were erased by conquest, climate change, or simply the slow erosion of centuries. Their cities crumbled, their languages fell silent, and their gods were forgotten. But the calendar, often etched in stone or cast in bronze, endured. It is a message in a bottle, washed ashore from a sunken world, waiting for us to decipher it. This is why the preservation of cultural heritage is not a niche academic hobby. It is an essential human duty. Every time a language goes extinct, a tradition is lost, or an ancient site is looted, we lose another one of these keys. We lose a unique way of seeing, a unique answer to the universal human question of how to live in time. Each calendar is a testament to our species' boundless creativity and our stubborn refusal to be forgotten, a permanent mark saying, "We were here, this is how we saw the universe." Remember us, from the intricate bronze gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the silent, knotted cords of the Inca Quipu. These forgotten calendars are so much more than mere historical curiosities gathering dust in museum cases. They are powerful echoes of civilizations that time itself has tried to erase, each one a unique and profound attempt to answer humanity's most enduring questions. How do we find order in the chaos of existence? How do we mark our brief moment under the sun in a vast and often incomprehensible cosmos? These unearthed timelines offer us a direct line to those conversations, revealing a stunning diversity of thought that stretches from the deserts of Mesopotamia to the highlands of Peru. They show us that every culture, in its own way, developed a rhythm, a unique heartbeat etched into the very passing of days and seasons, a story told not in words but in the deliberate turning of a year. This journey through the ages invites us to do more than just admire ancient ingenuity. It asks us to hold a mirror up to our own modern relationship with time. In our world of digital precision, where every second is accounted for and synchronized across the globe, have we gained efficiency at the cost of meaning? The Gregorian calendar that dominates our lives is a masterpiece of administrative uniformity, but it often feels disconnected from the natural world and the deeper rhythms of our own humanity. These ancient systems challenge that disconnect. They whisper to us of a time when a calendar was not just a scheduling tool, but a sacred covenant, an agricultural guide, a political statement, and a philosophical manifesto all woven into one. Perhaps there is inspiration to be found in their example, a nudge to live more intentionally, to pay closer attention to the lunar phases outside our windows, the seasonal shifts in our local environment, and the natural cycles of rest and activity within our own bodies. They remind us that time is not just a resource to be managed, but an experience to be lived deeply and connectedly. So we turn the question over to you. After this journey across continents and centuries, which of these ancient calendars captures your imagination the most? Does the sheer mechanical genius of the Antikythera Mechanism leave you in awe? Are you drawn to the vast cosmic cycles of the Maya, or the harmonious ecological wisdom of Aboriginal Australian timekeeping? Perhaps the political power play of the Julian reform resonates, or the beautiful communal rhythm of the Hawaiian makahiki. Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. We genuinely love reading them and continuing this exploration together. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of how civilizations past measured their days, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the forgotten corners of history. Thank